MJ Crime Book Club. I am here with MJ Williams, Matt, whose crime debut I finished today, and we're just talking about it, and I can't even tell you the half of it, which is absolutely fine because you're going to have to read it. People are going to have to read this book, Matt. It's so good. And I said, it sounds wrong to say that I enjoyed it. I feel icky saying I enjoyed it, but it was an excellent read. So do you want to introduce yourself properly, and I will just pin us in the group so people can find us?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Matt Williams. I write as MJ Williams. I'm perilously close to 50 these days, and I'd always wanted to write a book.
And don't look a day over 23. It's sickening.
Well, warning, don't spend too much money on webcams. Seriously, save money on a shit webcam and nobody will realise how old you are. That's my plan. And basically, The Velocity of Blood. So I'd always written stories at school and always liked writing stories. And then in 2019, I was sat around faffing around on Twitter as you do, and I was bored. And I followed the Crime Writers Association. And I always got their anthology of short stories from the Marjorie Allingham. And they retweeted Sophie Hannah, she of New Poirot's and Little Face and whatnot, and they retweeted her saying, "Hey, Cambridge University are doing a part-time master's in crime and thriller writing, and I'm going to be the director of it. Open days on Monday." And I went from never having thought about doing that to, oh my God, I need to do that straight away. So I had a short story in mind, which freaked out everybody I worked with.
I can imagine after reading The Velocity of Blood.
And I sent them that. I went to the open day. I loved it. I sent them that, and then that became. I sent them the short story. That got me an interview. I then became part of the most wonderful group of crime writers, which is the first cohort of Cambridge Uni's Masters in Crime and Thriller Writing, and that was that. And then I had an idea. I had the prologue for The Velocity of Blood, and I had a couple of other ideas for stories. And I normally sort of have a few ideas to go with. And I showed the prologue to Emily Wimslow, who is American but based in Cambridge, who writes historic fiction, and she was like, "Oh wow!" And I thought, okay, well, that's what I was going for the first 3 paragraphs, and yeah, and you know, a mere 18 months later, I finished the damn thing.
Some of us have been working on our debut for 20 years. I wouldn't worry too much about that when it's as good as yours is.
So that's how I wrote. That's how I wrote it. And you know, a lot of it was written during lockdown. I've had a few health issues, which has given me bizarrely a bit of time to be working on it, which is, I suppose, it's an ill wind. And then I guess. I'm going to be careful on the spoiler alert.
Please don't spoil anything because it's so intricately done. It's kind of, I don't know how I'm going to even word some of the questions. I've written things down and I've thought a lot about it and I've made notes while I've been reading it, and most of it I can't touch. So yeah, please no spoilers.
Well, I'm just looking. I'm wondering if I see how many people are in the group and how quickly they're going to leave when I say this bit, but. I honestly think that writing a twisty crime thriller is a bit like writing comedy, in that comedy is a setup line and you know what the expected line is and the punchline takes you off to the side. Whereas when you're writing a twisty crime thriller, you don't make it as obvious as comedy. So I'm not taking you down a garden path. I'm not even showing you a garden path. I'm sort of saying, I'm letting you as an experienced reader who knows crime go, I think I know what the garden path is. And then boom. And that is what I wanted to get to. And I wanted to have, so far, nobody has spotted the twist. I've had a few people who I've known for decades ping me and go, "Oh my God," except they didn't use the word God. And that was exactly what I was going for. And I guess the other thing is that nobody's come to me and gone, "Yeah, I didn't spot the twist coming, but it was implausible." Because I think as readers, you know, when you get an implausible twist, you just go, you roll your eyes and go, "I've just read 19,000 words." So that's kind of what I like writing. I like writing stuff that's twisty. I like reading stuff that's twisty. I also like reading sort of comic detective stuff. And there's a few bits of sort of sly humor in this, but this is not supposed to be a funny book. The subject's too serious. So yeah.
No, but the way you use humor, just a bit here and there, it just removes a bit of the tension at the moment when you feel like your heart's going to burst out of your chest. which sounds like such a cliche. I feel like I'm going to be a walking cliche tonight. Everything that comes out of my mouth is going to be a cliche, but there's just so much to love about this book, even though it is horrific and it is horrendous and it is harrowing. And we talked for, quite a while the other day, and I was kind of putting off reading it until Saturday, and then Saturday didn't happen. I've read it today. I can still feel my heart racing. It's one of those things that you've just planned it. Did you plan it? Because it just seems so well thought out.
Yes and no. So maybe should I give sort of like the quick précis? Just
Yeah.
So basically, the storyline is about social media bullying and fat shaming, and we have our main character is a very nice 17-year-old lad called Jack, who lives
How
in
are
a
we
place.
pronouncing? Is it Tolleson?
Tolleson.
Okay.
Tolleson. And he lives in a town called Whittlesford in California, which obviously doesn't exist. But the reason I picked that, I was on the train writing it. We've had between Cambridge and London. We pulled into Whittlesford, and I thought I'm having that. So that's why it's Whittlesford. And Jack is an overweight lad, and one day he takes a Diet Coke in the school canteen, and the in crowd spot this overweight lad picking up a Diet Coke, and they start taking the mickey out of him, and then that is the chain for a horrendous series of online bullying. And eventually, when a school teacher forgets his name and calls him by his very derogatory nickname, that's the final straw. And at that point, he thinks, right, fuck this. And he decides to go with a mass shooting. And he's sick of being forgotten. And so to not be forgotten, unfortunately, he's been so tortured that he thinks the way around this is to be the first person in history to achieve 100 victims in a mass shooting. So it's obviously very dark. And actually, I'm going to jump in and say this now. Obviously, we published it July 4th. That was shortly after Uvalde. Let's be honest, the problem isn't the book, the problem's the reality. But I just wanted to, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to make any money out of this. So the royalties from the first 1,000 books, if I sell that many, are going to the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence. So that's set up for the story. Now, as for the planning, I've never planned a thing in my life. I've busted my entire life. The word career is a verb. So I thought I did and I didn't. So I had the idea for Jack. I then wanted to have 3 voices. And my original plan was Jack in real time, as it were. A teacher whose day was just going to be, whose time frame was just going to be the semester, and then a police officer who was either going to be just that 24 hours, or I had the idea of having an FBI type guy who was trying to work out where the next atrocity would be by trolling social media. I then realized that thing wouldn't work because I'm 47 and I know nothing about social media. And rehearsing.
I ask my kids.
Yeah, I haven't got kids. Yeah, and if you ask other people, they get very judgy. So I looked at it and I thought, right, okay, how are we going to do this? And then I came up with the idea of having Jack as planned. And then I wanted the second voice, and I wanted the parent, because I was doing a lot of research. And Sue Klebold, who is the mother of Dylan Klebold, who was one of the Columbine shooters, she's an incredibly brave woman, and she does lots of speeches around it, and she's written a book about it and so on. And I thought, okay, we can put a mother in there. But I wanted to not make it We Need to Talk About Kevin. So I have never read We Need to Talk About Kevin. I've never seen it.
I haven't. It's at the side of the bed. I've started it multiple times. I stopped.
Everybody told me I needed to read it when I started writing, and I was like, shit, I've already got this idea. I can't read it now.
No.
I wasn't, let's be honest, this is the first book. If I got published, it was lovely, but I wasn't expecting it. I just didn't want to have to rewrite. So I've got the mother. And then the third one, it's a bit, so one of my lovely colleagues on the crime writing course very kindly pinged me and said, hey mate, this podcast I listened to, they had a thing about Columbine for the anniversary, thought it might come in handy. I thought, oh, thank you mate, that's very kind of you. Had a listen, not bad. Then obviously it's got, it says, if you like this, you'll listen to this. And another podcast was full of such absolute little hits. And they were talking about Columbine, and they hadn't done their research. They were mixing up which victim did what, which shooter did what. They were mixing up which victim's parents said what. It was absolutely awful. And I thought to myself,
so is this the inspiration for Nick and Chris who run the podcast?
Yeah. The Third Voice is a podcast that looks back, and they are horribly sensationalizing little twerps. And they don't do their research. And I also wanted to sort of highlight, if you will, gosh, that does sound very wanky, sorry. I also wanted to bring out how public atrocities become public property. Because if you look at, you look at Lee Harvey Oswald, you look at any shooter in history, they've become public property. And so even after their death, they don't have any control. And so that was how I wanted to do that. So that was sort of the three voices. I wrote them in 3 Word documents. I vaguely had an idea for a storyline. So I had the start, I had the ending. I tried to plot a little bit, but then I put them all together on, I actually used an Excel, and I did them by chapter, and then I knitted them together using Excel because I didn't want to have too many gaps between each voice. But in terms of how to write it, some days I woke up and I wanted to be a podcaster, and some days I wanted to write up and see if I could write it as a mother. I workshopped it with the Cambridge guys, half of whom, half of whom were parents and were mothers, and they didn't think it read weirdly for a bloke writing a female character.
No, not one bit actually. That hadn't occurred to me, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Hadn't occurred to me. Yeah.
So that was how it came together. And I didn't write it in order, and that was a pain in the arse. So because when you first write about a room, you describe it in detail. But if that's not the first time it shows up in the story, then you need to go through at the end of it and read it again and again and again. Oh crap! Because I wrote the ending, I wrote the prologue, then I wrote the ending, and then I had to do the rest. And then I had to lift out chunks and move it so it followed sequential. But I wanted a big Reservoir Dogs style dramatic end, except that
don't spoil it.
No, I was just going to say Steve Buscemi does not appear in this.
Fair enough. I'm going to say hello to everybody. Hello, everybody who's watching. And thank you, Kaz, for tagging. And Mills, I hope your foot's better. Mills was stood on by a horse. She has not made a secret of this. She's absolutely fine. Fine is there's nothing broken. There's bruising. So I hope walking around today hasn't damaged it too much. Yours is one of the only. Actually, yours is the only book I've ever read, and I wrote down this quote from the beginning of it. You said, not many I've written down, not many interviews will start with an author who would love for their book to be obsolete. So that's what you've written in your introduction before the book really, before it begins.
Yeah.
You've written quite a detailed explanation of your thoughts behind the book and some of the facts and figures, which are staggering. I thought I knew quite a bit, and this has made me realise how much I didn't know at all. But I agree, as excellent as this book is, I wish there was no need for this story.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So as I've mentioned, my royalties for the first 1,000 are going to Brady.
Yeah.
And if it sells as many as S.J. Watson and that end up being a movie, then we might have to re-examine it, because if I sell 6 million copies and I only give the first 1,000 royalties to Brady, that's kind of missing the point. It's a tough one because culturally, I love the United States. I'm there as much as I possibly can be. You can probably see there's a baseball somewhere in the background. That's my thing. And it's difficult to avoid the politics around gun control when you do a book like this. But for the record, I like shooting guns. I like going to a range when I'm in California. I rent a pistol for an hour, or I book up a lesson, which you need to do in California. In Miami, you don't. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying something that, as an Olympic sport, requires a phenomenal fine motor control. I happen to believe that there's everything wrong with having easy access to assault rifles and weaponry and leaving it lying around the house. And the evidence seems to bear that out. Now, we have had school shootings. We've had mass shootings in the United Kingdom. We had school shooting in Dunblane. We changed the law. I'm old enough to remember Hungerford, when Michael Ryan, if I remember rightly, had a Kalashnikov AK-47, which is an insane weapon for a private citizen to own, but they're still available, or weapons like that are available in the United States. So what I would love people to do, and it's up to them entirely, is donate a few quid to one of the charities. If you're a UK citizen like me, you can't give any money to a political action committee in the US, the PACs, but you can give them to the Brady campaign, which is why my money's going to Brady. What's really interesting is some of the reaction I've had from some folks in the US. So there's a review on Amazon, and I confess that I did genuinely burst out laughing, which would probably infuriate him. But it basically said, the author is from England, and he thinks we have a problem with gun control in the United States. This book is drivel and not worth reading. So obviously, he got his panties somewhat of in a bunch about that, and it did make me chuckle because he's just donated $2 to the Brady campaign. So that made
I was just thinking the same thing.
And I get it. You have the right to say what you want. You have the right to feel what you want. But from my perspective, I do wish the book was obsolete. I do wish I'd never heard of Columbine. I do wish everybody at Uvalde was still alive. I wish that everybody at Buffalo was still alive. That wasn't a school shooting, but it was a mass shooting. But maybe the best way I can put it, I did a lot of research on this about guns and about gun control. And maybe, just maybe, if one of the best websites to research US gun laws is the foundation set up by a congresswoman who survived being shot in the head, maybe that's an indication that we need to have a look at this again. So that was it's a tough read for that, but like I say, I guess the problem, hopefully the book's not the problem, but the problem is the reality. So that's why I guess I did a fairly detailed footnote, author's note at the start, because there's never a right time to publish something like this, but maybe there's not a wrong time either.
I want to talk a little bit about Jack, because he is a lovely young man. His mum is clearly proud, and she should be. This is why it's so important to think about the families on all sides of these tragedies, because this might not be the case for a lot of the real tragedies, the real events. But in this book, Jack is a lovely boy who is being bullied and doesn't even see it. He doesn't even hear a lot of the things that people are saying about him. And it's when it ramps up and they try and get his attention that it really goes wrong. But you've written this wonderful young man, loves Mr. Orange, who is his cat, loves his mum, his dad. He doesn't have an odd upbringing. It's these other children that change him. His upbringing is very safe, very warm, very loving, very hopefully quite normal. I use normal in air quotes, but kind of a nice upbringing that anyone would be lucky to have.
I guess it's one of the things about bullying. So all the acts of bullying that are in the book are acts of bullying I've read about in the real press.
Oh.
Now, they weren't all lumped on the same person, but they happened. So there have been groups, Facebook groups, set up for everybody but X in a school.
Okay.
There have been deep fakes done. There have been, spin the bottle type stuff. Everything happened there. And so when I was trying,
horrifying that's all true.
It's horrific. And when I started looking, so like I said, I don't have kids. My nieces are 18 and 16, so different era. The bullying that I got at school, and most of us, my generation got, was all physical, and it was all real time. There was no online. It was all in person. But then the thought occurred, and one of the advantages of doing the Cambridge thing was, while everybody on the course is my age, there or thereabouts, I was being a tragic middle-aged man and doing athletics with the regular age students, sort of 18 to 22. and they've gone through the online bullying, so they were really good at being able to bounce ideas. And the thing about bullying is sort of twofold. Firstly, it normally starts with the victim not being aware of it, because it's the idea, the thought, the backstabbing, and then it becomes in person. And the online has made that just far more easy to be anonymous along that way, where even the stuff that you know about as a victim is still anonymous because you don't know who's doing it. That was one bit. The second bit, I guess, my generation is not immune to online bullying, but it's happened. But it didn't happen in school. It happens a lot in the workplace, especially these days when everybody has to wander around carrying phones and dialing in and being permanently available. But what I kind of wanted to get to with Jack was just, if you loaded up all this stuff onto one person, could we get to a stage where even a unrelated observer would feel sorry for the shooter? And this, when I was talking about this to Sophie Hannah, massive name drop, do apologise, but when I was talking to Sophie, she said, this could be very unique because this is a school shooting where we're on the side of the shooter. And that was where I wanted to get to. I mean, I don't like black and white. I like greys. I like nuance. And nobody deserves to be killed. But at the same time, I wanted people to have sympathy with Jack. And so taking this perfectly normal, ordinary guy who in this world of body fascism, for want of a better phrase, is just singled out. And then the final bit about bullying, and I suspect everybody has been on the wrong side of it in our lives. The worst thing about being bullied is not the actual bit of being bullied. It's that your perception is your knowledge, and your knowledge is that there is no way out. And that's the hopelessness. And that's what I wanted to get to. And if I've done my job properly, people sit there, and by the time Jack comes up with his plan, we're all on his side and we go, what you're about to do is horrific. But you know what, mate? I don't feel bad about it. And that's kind of how we got to.
Yeah, and that's why I said it's saying it's an enjoyable read made me feel icky. I've probably said it about 4 times now.
I'll take that.
But we've got a couple of comments coming in. So Mills is saying guns absolutely terrify her. She's come close to a gun, and that was in the context of equine euthanasia in the hand of someone with the appropriate licensing, and that was terrifying. I can imagine. I was offered some shooting lessons. I don't like loud noises.
Yeah, and
I can't even imagine.
But yeah, this is the thing. You know, we are not immune to crime in this country. We are not immune to crimes against persons in this country. But the reason why the military, with their very large budgets, use guns is because they're incredibly efficient. And it sounds very dispassionate to say that, but it is a hell of a lot easier to kill somebody from a distance with a gun than it is using anything else lying around. And that's why, you know, when you look at the data, it correlates to it. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the US, but fundamentally I'm a bloke from Chapel Brampton. But I couldn't, as much as I would have liked to have written a story like this in my tiny little village of 250 people with a post office and 3 buses a day, the only place you could write this is in the United States.
I wonder how much more difficult it would be for me to read it if it was set in the UK. It's that kind of degrees of separation, isn't it?
Yeah. And
I found it, the build up to reading it, I found very difficult because I had a certain idea of what it was going to be in my head, and that was completely not what you've written. Completely not what you've written.
It's an interesting one because I wanted the 2 main places in the book are California, which is a fictionalized town, Whittlesford, which is actually it's a different town, which is my favorite place in the US, and I'm not naming it because I don't want to besmirch it. And I want the trouble with, normally, let's face it, when a place is known in history, it's not for something good. You know, if you think of somewhere where you can mention the name and everybody goes, oh yeah, it's normally something terrible has happened there. And the other place is Texas. And those two places are sort of characters in their own right. And so California was an easy one for me because I know it really well. I know it inside out. I've gone there every year for the last 20 years bar COVID. And also, because of Hollywood and the nature of Hollywood, I think most people have a sense of what California is. Might not be entirely accurate, but they've got a rough idea. Whereas if I said it in Kazakhstan, then most people go, "Ooh, I don't know what that's like." Then the other thing was Texas. And gun laws in the US are different between the different states. And Jack couldn't get what he needed in in California, so he needed to go somewhere else. And actually, Texas doesn't have the loosest gun laws in the union. Arizona's pretty similar, and so on. But I wanted to bring him to Texas because my era, my generation, obviously I'm too young to remember the JFK assassination, but I was 15 when JFK, the Oliver Stone movie, came out, and they show everybody's seen the Walter Cronkite newscast where, from Dallas, Texas, the news apparently official. And so when I hear the words Dallas, Texas, it's unfortunate because Dallas is a lovely place and there's lots of lovely people there, but I still think automatically of the Sixth Floor Repository and JFK and Walter Cronkite and so on. And so I wanted to have you couldn't have done that in the UK because we don't have places like that speak to something. There are certain towns that have a particular vibe. So Liverpool for music and music and so on. Newcastle, where Newcastle United, frankly, is probably recognised as an official religion. The fans are that passionate, and Brighton for party town and various different things. But we don't have that sense. So that's why I sort of went California and Texas. But yeah, it's difficult to work out how to transpose this anywhere else. But I guess there are some things that are just an American tragedy, and there's not a lot you can do about it.
One of the questions that we always ask, or quite often ask, is: have you ever acted out a scene for the purposes of making sure you've got it right? Now, we've had things like Mark Richards fighting on the end of Whitby Pier.
Yeah.
We've had Jane Isaacs, who buried a pig shoulder in her garden in concrete for a year just to check whether it would decompose. Don't do that because
don't leave me hanging. Would it decompose?
No, I'll tell you, it didn't until they dug it up a year later and the oxygen hit it. And then it very quickly started to decompose as barbecues were going on in the gardens all around them and the smell. So then they were very quickly trying to dispose of it. We've had Anne Coates held a knife up to her own throat just to see what it felt like. Yours is quite different. The one that I know of from yours is quite different.
Oh, yeah. So obviously I wrote this during COVID. So I didn't need to walk the streets of California because I've done it before and I knew I had ideas. I've been on an American school yellow bus for the simple reason that if you run the Boston Marathon, which I've done a couple of times, extremely slowly and for charity, don't get excited, you meet up. Boston's a point to point, so you meet up in the middle of Boston, you jump on the yellow school bus, they drive you 26.2 miles, chuck you out, and then you run back. So I knew what they kind of felt like, because obviously otherwise all Brits would have just seen it, we'd never been in one. But for Dallas at the time, I hadn't been to Dallas, and I wanted Dallas obviously because of the JFK connection. And so what I did the walk on Google Earth, which is the only way I could do the walk, because in a perfect world I'd have gone and wandered through it. I'm a massive Le Carre fan, and you read his autobiography, and the one time he didn't walk the route himself, somebody annoyed of EC2 wrote to him and said that's not possible. But I walked it on Google Earth, so I got Jack into Dallas Airport, Dallas Fort Worth. I put him on the DART, the rapid transit, and then he has to walk through downtown Dallas to get to where he's buying the gun. And as I'm walking along on Google Earth, this is genuinely true. There is a 20-ish, 25, 30 foot high fiberglass eyeball, which is a bit of modern art. Just Google Dallas Eyeball. Even if you're at work, I promise it's safe. But Google Dallas Eyeball, and it's there. And I just thought to myself, A, that is really weird because it's, anatomical. B, I think that's what they call a metaphor for being online. And C, that is just, I'm like, that's going in the book. It just has to. So that's the only bit of research, I guess, the only thing I lived out. I didn't need to live, most of the other stuff I didn't need to live out because I'd read about it sufficiently, or in terms of the sense of desolation about bullying. It's happened to me, it's happened to everybody. My experience isn't worse than anybody else, but it has happened, and therefore I was able to put myself back in those parts. And when I did, there were moments when I wish I still smoked, because you finish writing some of it, and if I could, I'd have gone out. I'd have gone for a walk in a fag, because it was just fucking hell. That was brutal. And I never thought I'd get to that. I never thought when I started writing, I never thought I'd get that emotionally attached to it. But there's a couple of scenes in there with Jack and his cat, Mr. Orange. Like I say, another homage to Reservoir Dogs. Just for Americans call ginger cats orange cats, hence.
I didn't know that.
Thing.
Even knowing Mr. Orange, I didn't know that was where it came from.
Oh yeah, that's so it worked quite well. But yeah, even that. So yeah, there's a few moments in there where it's. What I want the reader to get to is that fucking hell moment. And obviously, public service announcement: don't smoke. But if you do smoke, I want you to get to that stage where you go, fuck, I need to go for a ciggy. So yeah, that was kind of the idea.
I don't, but I can understand the points of the book where people who do would go, right, I need a minute.
Yeah.
And I had to nip out for kind of 40 minutes this afternoon. Other than that, I have literally sat here and read it in one sitting.
Oh wow, thank you.
I've not put it down. Even the bits where you kind of like, as we've said, it's an uncomfortable read. There's a lot about the real lives of teenagers and the things that they get up to, and reading that when you've got teenagers of your own is not. It's uncomfortable, but it should be uncomfortable.
Oh yeah. And
the whole book is uncomfortable, but it's such a good read.
Well, most of my friends who are parents, I've got 3/4 of the way through, and then they've gone. Especially the new parents.
Right.
For the new parents, one of my best friends, bless her, Jen, she gets a name check in the thanks. I'm going to talk about the thanks in a minute, actually. But Jen's a relatively new mother, and she was the one who liked my short story that made me apply in the first place. And she pinged me at silly o'clock because babies and feeds and whatnot, and she was like, "I'm really nervous about Jack." I was like, "He's not real." So. But yeah, if I can I jump on my name checks? I thanked everybody who needed to be thanked, but the people I really need to thank, and if you're in London, do go there, is the Dose Espresso coffee place, which is on Long Lane near Barbican Tube. I wrote a lot of it there. I wrote a lot of it in lockdown, going there and fetching coffee and bringing it back. They are the nicest people on the planet. They make the best coffee on the planet, and you'll get some decent music recommendations as well. So. That's my advertising, but that's my advertising spent.
Well, I will tell you that bulletcoffee.com is available.
You're joking.
No. Oh. Of all the things I Googled, I didn't Google the blooming eyeball, but kind of, I'm reading it on my laptop. So, well, I was reading it on my laptop. Bulletcoffee.com is available. It's about $2,000 and something, but.
Oh, sorry, you mean the website's available? Oh, thank God for that.
Oh, sorry, you're thinking I meant the coffee. No, sorry.
Thank God, because I genuinely, Bullet Coffee sponsors the podcast, and I genuinely Googled everything I possibly could, because I figured that this book would hopefully sell in the UK, and it might sell a few copies in the US, and the US has got quite a lot of lawyers, so I made damn sure that Bullet Coffee.
No, just the website, bulletcoffee.com.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I should take it over. If the book doesn't work out, maybe I'll give that a go.
Maybe you should. Well, maybe not buy it for $2,000, but it'd be a good homepage for people who Googled it to then bounce to your website. But
that's a great.
Anyway, that's an idea for a different day. Yeah, Mills is saying she got badly bullied at school, and thankfully the only online thing that was a big deal at the time was MSN.
Yeah.
How young are you, Millie? Oh my word! The thought of what goes on now is just beyond words. Yeah, it's terrifying.
You've got
and she's and she said, "Off to buy your book now. These author chats are dangerous."
Thank you.
So yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a scary online world.
Yeah.
You don't have the ability to get home and get safe anymore, because if you are, in my era, as soon as you got home, at least the school bullies were gone. That didn't mean you had a perfect home life, but at least it was relatively safe. And like I said, I did a lot of researching of the online stuff. Most of it was actually, and this is very dark, but I read the thing that prompted it originally was there was a girl out in Essex who'd been horrendously bullied, and sadly she took her own life, and her parents were completely unaware of it until it all came out afterwards. And that, I read that in the paper and my heart just broke. And then I started doing a bit more research. And then you mentioned the website. I started doing a bit of research on how, because I'm not a technical expert and I needed to know how some of the technical stuff worked. And at the same time, I was trying to work, I thought, oh God, I better have a website. And not knowing anything about that. Cambridge University Athletics Club came to the rescue. I put something up in the chat and said, "Hey, does anybody know anything about building a website?" And the javelin coach pinged me and goes, "That's what my company does. Do you want one?" And I was like, "Yes." And are you available to talk to me about how social media works? So Fuat, who's a javelin coach by night and runs a company called Recreate Better, built me my website. And then also the guys there, they are all exactly how you would expect social media experts to be. Effortlessly cool and speak in language that I cannot understand, and they had to explain things about 8 times, and that allowed me to understand how people can find you online, how people can ruin all your safe spaces online, because it is just fairly horrific. And I didn't want this to be an easy read, but I also wanted it to be incredibly accurate, because it's an odd one. There's fiction that I've loved where I don't care about the accuracy, and I've known that some of it's a bit duff, but I don't care. But with this, I guess when I finally said I'd finished writing it, there was an element of, I'm not doing that again, but I am. But also, I wanted it to be accurate, and I didn't want anybody to be able to write to me and go, on page 56, you said. Well, there are a few, but yeah, I think readers on a topic like this, I think we deserve accuracy.
I agree, yeah, and there wasn't anything that jumped out at me as that would never happen. Everything, sadly, that you've written is so well thought through. It's so realistic.
It's a tough one, because I guess the one thing about this that hasn't happened in real life is the fact that the parents of the shooter think the victims deserved it. And that's tough, because you cannot say ever, quite reasonably, that, but you can understand why they might feel it. And that's the tough bit. And I was sending this to publishers during the back end of lockdown. And one of the things that happened during lockdown was that we had fewer school shootings. And we didn't have fewer mass shootings, but they just didn't happen at school. And a few publishers came back to me and said, I'm nothing personal, I like the way it's written, but I'm not touching a book where we're on the side of the shooter. And I had somebody who was going to help me out with the publicity. And after Buffalo and Uvalde, perfectly reasonably pinged me and said, "I'm really sorry, I don't want to go anywhere near this right now." And one, I completely understand, and I won't name her, but I will say thank you publicly for having the decency to say so rather than just going quiet.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's the why not now? Because we know there's going to be another one. That's the reality of it. There will be another one as long as we have these weapons available. people are going to do silly things with them, and they're going to do awful, awful things, and it's completely fucking unnecessary. So that made it quite a difficult book to pitch, and for that reason as well, it's going to be a difficult book to read. And I guess from a commercial perspective, if you're a publisher, you want a book that can sell loads. And when you look at some of the harder hitting books in the crime genre, or I guess more specifically about this topic, some of them are very well known, but they haven't exactly sold millions. So yeah, but it's a bit tough.
Yeah, definitely. And there's still this thing of blind eyes being turned. You know, people just looking the other way. I will be the first to admit, and you're well aware of this, that this probably isn't a book I'd have picked up.
Yeah.
However, I'm glad I've read it.
Thank you. It's a tough one. So I think when we look at why we read crime, sometimes you end up on the side of the baddie. I have, not that anybody thinks I do, but for the record, I have nothing against Charles de Gaulle. I have nothing against any French president. But when you watch either the movie of The Day of the Jackal or you read the book, there's a little bit of you that is on the side of Edward Fox.
Haven't read it yet.
Got
it there.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, de Gaulle,
I won't remember. By the time I get to read it, I won't remember.
But yeah, there are books where there are things written from the viewpoint of the baddie where we get on their side. Ocean's 11 from more recently in Movie Land. Some of the everybody likes a good heist. Yeah, when we're on the side of the baddies and they're nicking diamonds. Oh yeah, the Tiger Heart thing is brilliant.
Did you read Tiger Heart?
I started. I'm not that far in because I keep getting distracted. Attention span of a gnat, but yeah, we like being on the side of baddies. And then I think as well, everybody likes a good revenge thriller. And the reason I think we like a good revenge thriller is because I suspect I'm like everybody else in that some of my best responses to people being annoying have happened a day later. And it's, oh crap, I wish I thought of that. And so if crime writing is about resolution and justice, and the justice that's achieved might not be that which is available through a legal framework, then it's about righting wrongs. And so from my perspective, when you look at quite a lot of the whodunits, it's about the bad guy being caught. When you look at a revenge thriller, it's normally a non-police setup where the police can't or won't do anything, therefore our hero goes and resolves it. And I wanted to set that up with a crime that most of us couldn't identify with. Now, interestingly, a friend of mine who is a parent said, "Why has nobody written a school shooting book where the shooter is a really pissed off mum?" Which I thought was an interesting one. And I suspect she'd been having a particularly bad day with her kids that day, where she was like, but you can't. But that's the thing, if we read crime, sometimes we want the restoration, the restorative justice. Sometimes we want the puzzle solving, the Inspector Morse type stuff, and sometimes we want the salaciousness that goes with being in the detail and plotting a crime. And so that was kind of why. That's another reason why I researched it as much as I did, because I wanted to have the detail as to how this character is put upon, and then how they respond. But yeah, I think we all like a good revenge thriller, don't we? It's just this revenge is that crime which most of us quite reasonably will run a million miles from.
Yeah. JP is his author Jonathan Peace,
whose book
and he's saying that there's literally no reason for a civilian to own that kind of weapon, and that it makes no sense. That's me diluting his comments. Sorry, JP, editing you as I go. And he says it sounds like a very intriguing book, and I'll be grabbing a copy. If I can use the word enjoy, JP, I think you really will enjoy it. I know the kind of things that he reads, and I think this is something that it's the whole heartbreaking, thought-provoking, unsettling, uncomfortable, but you can't not keep reading. You can't not know where this is going and how it's going to play out.
Yeah, I think when I think of books that made me uncomfortable, was it James Siegel who did Derailed, but then became the movie with Clive Owen and Jennifer Aniston?
I haven't read it or watched it.
It's a belter. It involves a very distasteful crime. I'm not going to give it away, but it's a book where you feel absolutely gut punched. And when I wrote this, I wanted to have that at the end. And obviously, as any debut author, you think, right, I've written a book, somebody's agreed to publish it. Crap, I need to get some cover quotes, so I need to get people to read it. So Graham Bartlett, who obviously wrote Bad for Good, and I've just seen on social media the reveal for his new one, which comes out next year, which looks an absolute belter. Graham Bartlett,
and I can tell you it is an absolute belter.
Did you get to read it? Oh, of course you worked with it, yeah.
I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, it is an absolute belter.
Yeah. So Graham Bless did a chat on the Cambridge course, and I pinged him and I just said, hey, is there any chance you can have a read? And bless him, he said some extremely complimentary things. And he and Leslie Cara, who I also browbeat to having a read.
Lovely Leslie as well.
They're both absolutely lovely, and Leslie was like, that ending. And that was what I wanted to get to. I wanted an absolute, frankly, headfuck of an ending where you go. So both of them were very kind. Alison Bruce, obviously the Cambridge connection with the DC Gary Goodhue, she was very kind. But I wanted to, for us to be on the side of Jack, he has to go through a hell of a lot of pain. Because if somebody just said something nasty to him and then he went and did this, we'd be like, well, dude, overreaction. So we have to lump it on.
I think we can still kind of go with overreaction.
Oh, totally. Yeah. You know what I mean. Yeah. But if he'd, for him to feel so down and so dejected and so broken that he does something horrific, he has to be loaded up with a lot of bad stuff. And by loading him up with a lot of bad stuff, it takes an awfully long time.
Mm.
And so if you had an ending that petered out, you'd be a bit like, shrug.
It would have been very deflating. Yeah. And we're obviously not going to say what the ending is.
Yeah. It's a bit like, I love Le Carre. I'm a massive Le Carre fan. I've got every single one of his, and I saw him live at the Royal Festival Hall once and what have you. He's wonderful. But I think it was Our Game, which just sort of vaguely petered out towards the end. And I remember when I read that being really pissed off. Because you need, if you build something up so much, you need...
Then it can't be a damp squib, can it? I haven't read that Le Carre, so I can't comment on it, but...
He's written so many other good ones, put it that way. No, let's face it, as crime, a thriller writer go, that's a career. That's an absolute banger. But yeah, no, I wanted to have a mic drop ending, and I thought about quite a few other ones. And when my friends just went, yeah, or oh, that's dark, rather than fuck, that's dark, and I wanted to get to the latter.
Yeah. And you did, and not in a sensationalist way. Again, all believable. And we really can't talk about it. I feel like that's enough about the end.
I'm being such a tease, and I do apologise. It's a bit Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap, isn't it? At the end where they say, please don't tell me.
I haven't read it.
Oh, it's just the play, so you know it's been going for 50 years.
Oh, yeah, I'm aware of the play. I've not seen that either.
Yeah. So when they stand up at the end, the audience say, there's a set pat piece that they say, which is, please don't tell people the ending, because we want to keep the play going. So it's a bit like that, but yeah, it's modern. It's obviously dark. It's not going to be for everybody, because it's going to be wee. And I think if there's one thing I'm actually proud of with this, it's that it's not that gory. there is, and I really don't. People write it, and that's absolutely fine. But I don't like reading slasher fiction. I don't like blood and guts. This obviously is dark, but you can do dark without doing the gore. And I always remember I went to see Mark Billingham, who's absolutely lovely, and he did a thing at Bloomsbury one evening. And
this is my Billingham shelf.
Oh, he's a cracking writer, and a lovely bloke. And he said, I can't remember how he phrased it. He said something like, "A single drop of blood on a white tile is far scarier than any amount of idiots with chainsaws." And he's absolutely right, because it's what that drop of blood signifies. And that's what I wanted to get to. So I didn't want lots of blood, and I didn't want lots of gore, and I didn't want cheap. And I think if I'd gone the sensationalist route, either it would have just been, sort of very pulpy, and it would have lost some of its weight. But also, or the alternative is that, and I don't think it would have been interesting, it would have turned into a parody. And if you think of, you can tell I like Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where they redo the Sharon Tate murders, but it finishes up with the different ending, which is very sort of Hollywood blood and guts slasher movie, and I don't want this to be that.
And it isn't.
Yeah.
No, it just isn't. Leslie Lloyd said, just read John Marr's new book that's so dark but has little gore, cleverly done.
Yeah, I mean, some people like writing gore, some people love reading gore. Some people
don't mind it. It's not maybe the first thing I'd pick up.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't not pick it up because of the gore either.
Yeah, and I think we all read different stuff at different times. I actually read different books at different places. So I've got a bedtime book, and I've got a sofa book, and I've got a tube book, because maybe it's my attention span or otherwise. But there are times when I want to read something deep and dark. And recently I've been reading Rumpole of the Bailey, which is nice and funny.
Okay.
Yeah, but
I remember the TV show, but
yeah. Well, if you think about it, Rumpole is a detective series, because he's always getting his client off and working out who actually did it. But it's very Columbo in that way. It's very light-hearted, and sometimes you want a bit more lightness in your life, and sometimes you want a bit of dark.
Yeah, agreed.
What mood you're in. But yeah.
That's the thing. If I'm reading for interviews, I try and read at least one book by every author before I talk to them. And if I've read a few dark ones, I might try and find something like I've got quick reads there that my desk is piled with books. So if I try and touch one of them, they're all going to topple. But the quick reads take maybe an hour or two to read, and they're a really nice palate cleanser. I've really enjoyed reading some of them.
You need an antidote, I think.
Yeah.
Stuff.
But then by the same way, if I've read quite a lot of, Rosemary Schrager, The Last Supper was an excellent book. I know it was co-written with somebody else, and I know it's controversial when a celebrity writes a book and they don't write the whole thing, but it is beautifully done. And that was a really nice cozy crime. But if I read too many cozy crimes, I'd probably read something darker.
Yeah. And even the authors that I like. So Ellie Griffiths was a tutor on the course. Ellie was super helpful with the book. And she's absolutely lovely. And I love the Ruth Galloway series. But I don't read them back to back to back to back. You do a bit of both. And same with Mike Connolly. I love Bosch. I think Bosch is absolutely fantastic. I read it right from the start. I just want to have the Mike Connolly moment where the US president walks out of a bookshop carrying my book at an airport, and at that point sales go mega, which is I think what happened with Michael Connolly. But even his stuff, which is amazing, I don't read them back to back to back. But what I do when they've got a new one coming out, I'll go back and I'll read the last couple before, so that just as I put it down and his new one comes out, I think November 8th. Not that I've written it in my diary or anything. But when
multiple alarms set.
Well, yeah, but when it comes out, it will be suitably warmed up for the Bosch experience. So yeah, and then hopefully as well, we should be moving towards paper copy for The Velocity of Blood as well. Obviously, most people read on Kindle these days, but a lot of people want paper. So yeah, fingers crossed that'll I'll start.
Have you actually got a copy of it now?
I did. I actually got it today. So I got the paper.
I knew the answer to that. That was a terrible setup. It was so obvious.
Oh yeah. So that is. Let's see. There is the cover. So that arrived today. And obviously,
so is that the first time you? It's not the first time you've held a paper copy in your hands, is it?
It's not quite, because when I first wrote it, I didn't think I was going to get published, because I figured nobody ever does. So what actually happened was I found a company that prints books for you, but technically doesn't publish them. So you're still an unpublished author. So I got a load done just for my mates, and I made up this cover, which was done with a £3 app that one of my nieces gave me, and it's a photo that I took in California. And so I printed out a load, and I gave them to my mates, and I gave one to everybody on the course to say thank you for helping me bring Jack to life and then kill him. And then, so then I went to, and so I had those lying around. And then when Darkstroke said, can we publish it? I was like, yeah, yes, of course you can. Followed by the cover. And I wanted to have the same cover. And they said, you can't prove you own the original, so copyright, fair enough. And B, they were far too diplomatic. What they actually wanted to say was, you don't do it for a living, so maybe we should leave it to people that do. So they came up with that, which I absolutely love. I mean, it's absolute genius. And I wanted a font with a bit, skew-whiff, if you like, and a tattered American flag. So I've got that today. We're working out when the paper comes. It normally, I think contractually it's supposed to come within 3 months of the online book, and we launched it on July 4th, so it shouldn't be too long. And obviously some people will read it on Kindle, some people read it on paper, but it's quite a cool feeling to have that today. And I wandered past my fave coffee shop today, and they all got a copy when I wrote it just to say thank you. And I know one of the guys there has read it. Another one was like, I'm very glad you wrote it, but not reading it. Thank you. It's fine. And I showed it to them, and they were like, we like the original, the one that you did for us, but this looks real. So yeah. But then again, they probably have to be nice, the amount of money I spend in there buying coffee. My addiction.
And just like that, Matt, it's 8 o'clock.
Oh, blimey.
That has absolutely disappeared.
Yeah.
So I've spent more time talking to you in various times this week than I have most other people. So it's been really, really fun. I am really glad I read the book. I don't know that I'd have picked it up, but I am glad I did. And I think that's important, because I think for anybody watching who thinks, do you know what, I'm just not sure that's my thing, I promise you it is.
That's very good of you. It's one of those things, and it goes back to why I didn't. There's loads of books about school shootings. There's Vernon Godlittle, there's 21 Seconds, there's We Need to Talk About Kevin, and I haven't read any of them. And I had the idea, and I guess the starting point for this, just to be really quick, was the anniversary of Columbine. They had a chap on from the Charitable Foundation, and he said, a lot of people who get in touch with us, a lot of kids who get in touch with us are doing it for a school project. Some people are getting in touch because they're planning their own one and they're trying to get tips. Yeah, it's a very small percentage, but he said some people are clearly trying to work it out. And then at that point, I thought, I've got to write this story. But also what I wanted to do was not read anything else about it. I didn't want to be polluted, is such a mean way of saying it, because the book, I've heard those books are amazing. I haven't read them, but I didn't want to be distracted. And so I wrote the book for me. Mm-hmm. I didn't change a lot of stuff that people told me I should change, because I think as authors, what you want to do is quietly bump off all of your friends who go, have you thought about this? I'm writing the book that I want to write, not the book that you want to write. And so I wrote the book that I wanted to write, and I wrote the book for me. I'm delighted it's been published. I'd love for it to make an awful lot of money for the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence. But I think maybe that's probably the best place to start, is writing for yourself. And the next one's a hell of a lot more lighthearted.
Well, we'll see when get it written, send it over, and let's have a look.
I'll send you the prologue. I'll see if you like it.
Well, thank you so much to everyone who has watched and commented and gone and bought books. You've sold books tonight, which is always good. That's always a great thing. So thank you to everybody who's bought the book as well. Thank you to you, MJ Williams, for a lovely hour again. And what an excellent read and a very brave thing to have written.
I didn't realise that when I started. I found out after. Hopefully I would still have been brave enough, but I'm not sure. Thank you so much, Sam.
Well, thank you so much.
Bye.